Is Zhongli getting buffed? Should he get buffed? Climb on at Genshin Impact, the Twitter official Mihoyo, as well as in the official forums for Mihoyo, are going over and listening and wanting your guys' feedback and responses to this issue of sorts with the community talking about Zhongli. So we're going to be talking about Zhongli today, as well as what is going to be happening with him and their stance on him. If you're new to the channel, we provide high-quality, data-driven Genshin Impact character guides as well as content critique. If you want to see more stuff like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on. If that's not enough for you guys, we've been dared that if we hit 100,000 subscribers, we'll pull for C6 Ganyu and Bite the Bullet, as long as we hit that deadline before the banner comes out. That's right, you could not only get top tier content, but also witness the C6 GOAT, actual GOAT. Anyways, now first we're going to be going over their stance on Zhongli. They're going to be going over my stance on Zhongli. You might have already seen my stance on how he's currently implemented power-wise, but I do have a lot of reservations about exactly what he means for design space in character fantasy and how he just fails on all fronts in that regard. So let's go ahead, and the official Twitter here, you guys can see, takes you to the link here. They say, travelers, we've recently had a lot of feedback from travelers regarding the issues with Zhongli. We'd like to take this opportunity to have a conversation with everyone. So if you go over here, I'll have all the links to this stuff down below for you guys as well. They just kind of reiterate what the Twitter post said, that they've received a lot of feedback. They said that they're keeping a close eye on it. What that means, who knows? Maybe they're just trying to keep everyone calm there, and they don't have any intentions of doing anything at all. But these were their initial ideas for Zhongli. They go and say Zhongli is a support type character. He's unique in the fact that he can provide shields to your team, to provide absorption effects and covers, and they sit here without relying on any other equipment, which that's not true because it relies on HP percent and it scales off HP percent there. But maybe what they mean there is that HP is something that you just kind of nonchalantly get. He's got a relatively big HP pool. We've seen characters get up to 50,000 HP on Zhongli, but I digress. He still needs equipment for that. Planet Befall, they're talking about his ability to AoE CC with the petrification. I want to touch on that as well. While it is a very powerful ability, I have some reservations about the constellations with Zhongli, as well as, like we said before, his character fantasy. And if you don't know what character fantasy is when it comes to game design, we'll have a small little reiteration and conversation about that as well. But they reiterate that he's more of a support type character. That's why he does less damage than other characters, less consistent damage than other characters there. He does do a lot of damage with his elemental burst, but he is geo type. He's not pyro type, he's not crowd type, he's not hydro type. And if you guys know anything about the end game for Genshin Impact when it comes to just doing sheer amounts of damage, if you're not one of those three types, you're never going to be setting the bar to the highest standard due to the fact that Vaporize and Melt are just so powerful. You're never going to be #1 in raw damage, because if you're not doubling your damage with Melt or doubling your damage with Vaporize, or if you're going to get a 50% damage bonus by doing those Vaporize or Melt combos in reverse, you just don't stand a chance. You'd have to literally have naturally twice the amount of multipliers of any of those other characters, straight up damage mods, just because you can't take advantage of that elemental reaction change for Vaporize as well as Melt here. But they reiterate here that they based him on receiving HP-related benefits, and this is something that I want to reiterate on and say that this is a part of the failed character design when we go into talking about how I feel about Zhongli's character design. The main way in which HP improves his abilities is to help him survive. In contrast to high damage dealers, his role is to provide secure and stable protection for the party in manner, which is another thing that I have reservations with. Negative ones in a matter of combat environments. Whether we will make adjustments to challenge stages, aspects of the open world systems, and characters themselves, we always start with a comprehensive analysis of character combat statistics, user feedback, and character ethos before making a careful and considered plan. So they're looking for information on how you guys feel about it. I will have, like I said before, a link to this down below for you guys. Leave constructual feedback, right? Don't just go in there and be like, the character's garbage, fix them, because that doesn't help them. If they're actually looking for actual feedback, go in there. Maybe if you don't have your own ideas, if you like my ideas, reiterate them in there. And what is the character design, the character fantasy, and what are the things that he fails at? So we're going to be talking about two big points here with Zhongli. Zhongli does two things that I just do not like. And there's a third thing tacked on there that I don't think they should do to any character whatsoever. So Zhongli's character fantasy, right? He's this HP scaling, shielding support type character, lower multipliers on his normal attack skill, lower multipliers on his elemental skill, the pillar. It pulses for low amounts of damage there. It does have some issues as well that needs to be fixed because the elemental generation on that is seemingly pretty random for a lot of players out there. I've never had the biggest sort of drawbacks on that, but it seems to be about like a 40-50% chance for it to actually generate a particle when it pulses, and it actually does not generate ever multiple particles with multiple georesonance constructs out there. Now, the multiple georesonance constructs not generating multiple particles on a single enemy, I can see that, but the fact that it's total RNG, even at best 50% chance, you could have it sit there and pulse and hit the same enemy 6 times and not generate any energy whatsoever. And for a support type character, that is something that shouldn't ever happen. Another thing that shouldn't ever happen that Zhongli also suffers from is he's supposed to be a shielding type party character. Now, something that I've always disagreed with when it comes to characters is them having the ability to actually be a shield type character and locked out of that ability until they have a constellation in order to do that in multiplayer. So we've seen this on characters like Diona having a constellation so she can finally shield players in multiplayer. He has the same sort of thing, although this is the shield attached to Planet Befall. No support type character that has a shield should have to rely on a constellation to actually utilize be played for their role in multiplayer. You should just shield everyone. That should just be baseline. That should just be baseline because that is what that character does when you're playing solo player. You use the shield, you swap out, you're good to go. The fact that you can't do that in multiplayer, you take Noelle in the multiplayer, you use your shield, you're shielding only ever just yourself. You take Zhongli, you're not Constellation 2, you're shielding only ever just yourself. If you take Diona, you don't have Constellation 2, you're shielding over just yourself. That's it, period. You take Xinyan, you're shielding just yourself. That should never be a thing ever, and I've always disagreed with that, and it's terrible to see that that's another part of his character design, his character fantasy. The bruiser type support character gets in there, CCs the enemies, can take some hits, uses the shield, and gets on out there. And that's just part of his character design and fantasy that you can't play with if you're in multiplayer unless you have Constellation 2. If they want to leave this Constellation strictly Planet Befall, give it an extra shield, I'm okay with that, but he should baseline, at least on his hold E, have the ability to give everyone else a shield. Same with, like I said, every other character that is a shield type character in Genshin Impact. The other thing that I want to talk about is the HP scaling, because they talked about HP scaling a lot. He needs to have some more HP scaling things. So an HP scaling on his normal attack wouldn't be broken. Even if you had like a 10% HP scaling on his normal attack, it would play into his class fantasy, and just like his C6 plays currently into his support class fantasy, this is not a broken ability, but it's Constellation 6 on Zhongli. This plays into what he does, and it's an entirely new mechanic. And if you go back, and before really Child, there wasn't any crazy new mechanics that 5-star characters really got access to through Constellations. They always sort of buffed or extended the things that they were already doing, right? You would have like increased fire or pyro imbue time on like Deluxe Constellation 6. You get like an attack buff for getting hit or attack buff for teleporting around the Kaching. Something of that nature, you would get a buff to a pre-existing thing. This is an entirely new mechanic that makes your Jade Shield heal, which kind of turns you into a Xingqiu type sort of support. And this is another thing that I have a big problem with, and we've talked about this with Ganyu as well. And when I went over the Ganyu skills, the character design and the character fantasy seems to be kind of getting stripped out of their base kit. Even if it's not overpowered and makes them a brand new, crazy, broken character, some of the things that aren't really that broken are being taken out and putting into Constellations. And we haven't really seen that before, right? It'd be kind of like I talked about in that video. It'd be like if Diluc didn't have 3 uses of his elemental skill unless he had a Constellation. If he didn't imbue Pyro on his elemental burst unless he had a Constellation. If Child's Riptide procs didn't exist until you got Constellation 4. If Klee didn't have an extra charge of her elemental skill unless you had a Constellation. You just didn't see that kind of design back before, and you're starting to see it now. And I've always been talking about this sort of thing. If you check out the live streams, or if you look at the very controversial video I've put up before on Ganyu, that's what that video was about. It wasn't about power, it was more about design space and the fun aspect of their kit and the character fantasy of their kit. And I did say I'd go over character fantasy real quick for you guys. Character fantasy, if you guys don't know what it is in game design, TLDR, is just what your idea of a character is, what they should live up to, right? It could be For instance, what sort of role that you want that character to play, what the background of that character is. Zhongli, right? Stone, he's the Geo Archon. He won a lot of wars. He's rock solid. He's got this HP scaling on some of his stuff, but not all of his stuff. So where's the rest of the HP scaling? Where's that character fantasy, the sort of bruiser-esque type character, the bruiser support character, can take some hits, get in there, do some damage with his ultimate, and shield up your team. The fact that you can't shield up your party members in multiplayer unless you have Constellation 2, that's a red flag to me. The fact that he's not really able to fully utilize the little bit of extra shielding that he can get. You want to leave the shield bonus onto the C6, go for it. But the healing should definitely be baseline because that's part of his character fantasy. He's there to protect your team, shield them up, heal them up a little bit there. And then the last thing I want to talk about is Planet Befall. Now, Planet Befall is a very powerful skill. I've been able to play with a lot of level 90 friends that I have with 90 Zonglings because they went totally in there and leveled them up right away, whereas I've been kind of, using them to get the information so I can level some other characters. But Planet Befall is a very powerful skill, especially in multiplayer. It's a 4-second duration baseline before the Constellation here. The Constellation increases it by 20% AoE effect and also increases the petrification duration by 2 seconds. Now, multiplayer, this is crazy good, especially the 6-second duration petrified. Plays into his class fantasy, right? Support character, petrification, crowd control, all pluses there. I don't really have an issue with this Constellation, but what I do have an issue with is the baseline duration. Now, I don't know if they factored in the animation time and the character swap time that it takes you to make use of that 4-second petrification in the baseline 4 seconds of Zhongli, because you have the animation lock of him actually summoning the comet and it starts to petrify them right then and there, and then you have to swap into your character and then start attacking. A lot of the time you lose about 0.5 seconds of uptime on that petrification. So if you want to leave this Constellation this exact way, that's fine. I would just increase the baseline petrification an extra 0.5 seconds to make it 4.5 seconds. That way, in single player, you can get the full 4-second intended duration off on his 4-second petrified because it's going to be factored in the time that you have to swap. Now, it does make it stronger in multiplayer, but you cannot make the argument down below that the reason that it is not 4.5 seconds, the reason that they didn't factor that in is because they were worried about it being too broken in multiplayer. That's not true because he can't shield anyone in multiplayer unless he's got Constellation 2. So you definitely realize that they're not balancing this character around multiplayer. So the other thing that I've seen a lot is his normal attack string, right? His normal attack string, very, very weak. Now it is and has lesser mods than the most common comparison that you'll see is the other polearm character currently in the game. Zhongli, Xingling. I always get those two butchered. Please forgive me. I butcher them together when I have to compare the two. She does have higher damage multipliers. His attack combo comes out slightly faster than hers. So he's got slightly lower mods, comes out slightly higher, but he's still a 5-star character. And the thing that I would like to see here, if you want to play in that class fantasy, give him some HP scaling on his attacks. That way you give people the ability to build him in one certain way. And this is why he's one of the most confusing characters to build and put into a team composition right now, because he's got half his stuff scales with attack, half his stuff scales with HP. Some of his stuff scales with both HP and attack. So what do you really do with this character? A lot of players get really confused with him. And even if you gave him starting like 5% HP scaling, and it went all the way up to like 10%, let's be extremely gratuitous and say 10% HP scaling on his normal attack. If you hit the 50,000 HP Zhongli build, you put him at 50k HP, you're still getting 5k extra damage per attack here. So, that wouldn't be the most broken thing. And obviously we're not doing 5k per hit on the 5 hit there. But if you give him like 5k extra damage, you built him up there, you want him to be full shielding. If you wanted to go out there, slug a little bit, get that bruiser character going on, that'd be pretty all right by me as well. So that's other things to think about when talking about Zhongli. That's the things that I have the biggest reservations about when it comes to this character. Primarily just the Constellation design and the unit design. That's what I don't like. I don't like the Constellation thing where the character doesn't feel complete. No, feeling complete and being powerful. I want to make sure that you guys understand, for those of you who are still here that haven't dipped out right away, are two totally different separate concepts. You could have a very boring character that is extremely powerful. And this is where a lot of people kind of got tripped up and confused when I was making that Ganyu video. You could have a character that did one normal attack that hit for a 9 million% multiplier. they'd be extremely powerful, and you could take away all of their other abilities. They'd be extremely boring. Now, that's obviously a huge hyperbole, but Ganyu's not that far off from that sort of character design. She's very basic in what she does at character Constellation 0, and she's way more fun to play at Constellation 6. She's got multiple activations of abilities. She's got instant cast on her level 2 charge arrows. She's got imperils, and she's got some extra damage for multiplayer as well with some of her other constellations. But mainly the thing that makes her fun to play is the extra elemental skill use in the free level 2 charge proc rate. Does that make her do more damage? Yes, but it gives her more of an interesting design and play cycle than her base Constellation 0 thing. And that's the big problem that I have with Ganyu, is without that Constellation 2, without that Constellation 6, she's gonna be relatively boring, because you have one elemental skill you use every 12 seconds. Until then, you're literally charging up a charge shot for 2 seconds, and that's what you're doing for the next 12 seconds, is just charge shot, charge shot, charge shot, charge shot, charge shot, charge shot. That's what you're doing with that character. Now, if that's up your alley, go for it, but that is way less interesting and interactive than what the things in the play cycle that you can have at Constellation 6, as well as the character design space and the character fantasy of a fast archer that gets in and out of combat, drops the ice damage, and does big AoE explosion damage. You can't do that at Caesar. You can't live that class fantasy. You get a watered down version, and that's really what it comes down to, is people are starting to feel, starting with, people were batting their eyes at Child Banner, like C6, like, oh, you get full uptime at C6. But now it really starts to feel like you're kind of getting some watered down versions. If you look at Zhongli and the couple of things that aren't broken but stripped out of his kit, and then you look at some of the future characters, what we know of right now, the C0 just isn't that it's less damage. It's just that it feels watered down and basic. And those are two different concepts. Hopefully you guys have a bigger understanding of what we were talking about there. Didn't ramble on for too much there, but I wanted to get that video out there for you guys. Make sure you guys leave your feedback to Mihoyo. If you had any sort of ideas, make sure you leave them down in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more in-depth coverage, opinions, or just factual-based, mathematical-based, and high-quality guides, come and hang out with the channel as well. Don't also forget to hit up the twitch.tv so you can hit the streams up and chill with us. So until then, guys, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.